for me, I learned about love in a very unusual place, in prison behind bars. And by practicing sound healing and meditation and in yoga and allow that to be a vehicle for me to go within, I was able to see that shame and guilt that often keeps people like ourselves in a very vicious cycle of addiction. But I also was able to move past that shame and guilt and connect to the true essence of who I am.
Hey y'all. Welcome back to the Stacking Days podcast, where we highlight underrepresented journeys of sobriety. I'm your host, Ray Donovan. Really excited about the conversation today. The brother that we have, his reputation actually precedes him. He was referred to the show just because he has such a compelling and great journey and story that I think that we can all benefit from. So really looking forward to getting into it with him. He's extremely dynamic, an entrepreneur. He's a recovery coach. He's also a legitimate healer, which I think that in this day and age, we can all use some healing. So without further ado, Kelvin, welcome to the show, man.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here and to share some of my experience, strength, and hope to you and to your listeners. So again, thank you so much.
Oh man, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you for joining. Let's just start this thing off the way that we always do. And I know for someone like yourself who's in long-term recovery, you have to think back here, but maybe bring us back to the beginning of your relationship with alcohol. Kind of what was your why behind why you drank, and what did it do for you? And then we'll kind of get into your journey into brighter days and take it from there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I do have to think back a little bit, and, when I think back at the beginning aspects of things, I grew up in a very strict household. I grew up in a very religious family. My father was a pastor. My brother was a minister, and uncles were pastors. So I grew up in a very religious faith, and I'm grateful for it. And I grew up with four older brothers. I'm the youngest of five. And, growing up, I dealt with a lot of mental health challenges, a lot of feelings of poor self-esteem, a lot of hatred issues, self-worth issues, a lot of emotional health issues. And growing up at that time, we didn't, in my household, we definitely didn't talk about mental health challenges. We definitely didn't talk about trauma at that time, and everything was really kind of focused on our faith, we prayed about it. We take it to Jesus. We go to church about it. And, that foundation really helped me to really build my spiritual practice to this day. But at the same time, I feel now, prayer works, and I know that it works. But there's other people in our lives that can help us to deal with some of the emotional distresses and pain that we deal with, such as professional support from a clinician, a therapist, a psychiatrist, and what have you. But at that time, in the '80s, early '80s, we didn't, that wasn't the route we was going. So having older brothers, seeing my older brothers drink and use drugs, I kind of gravitated towards that. And, when I got in my like 9, 10, 11 years old, I started drinking. And for me, it started off on the weekend things, hanging out with my cousins, my older brothers in the projects. And we kind of like, I might age myself a little bit, but I was drinking heifer rougher and private stock and all those different types of malt liquor, 40 ounces of that. And, it was an acquired taste, but at the same time, I enjoyed the feeling that this alcohol gave me, and for me, it kind of I kind of gradually started drinking from the weekends to, more during the week. And, it got to the point where I started drinking more, and then I started drinking more heavy liquor, like blackberry brandies. I never forget. My brother used to, purchase me some blackberry brandy, and I used to chug it down, me and my homeboy, and we'll go to school dances, and, we'll just act the fool pretty much,
Yep.
And I got to the point where I started skipping, class, to get drunk with my friends. By the time I was 17, I ended up quitting school altogether. And that's when my alcohol consumption started, I started drinking more, and that's when I started getting into the marijuana as well too. I used to, back in school, I used to sell marijuana, but I never smoked marijuana. But it was when I quit school, I started smoking marijuana, and I started drinking heavily. And
Hmm.
growing up in my household, seeing my brothers doing it, my friends, the people that I associated with, that was a way for me to kind of like numb the pain and feelings that I had at a very young age. And it started off as a social thing. I mean, I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be connected to my peers, to my brothers, and I enjoyed the feeling that alcohol gave me at that time. But then some point, maybe when I quit school and some other pains that I experienced in my life, that it wasn't just about socializing no more. I
Hmm.
was drinking for a different reason, and for me,
Yeah.
that reason was really to really numb that pain and hurt that I felt as a child.
Hmm. I mean, it sounds like in a lot of ways, when you were 17, it was almost like a perfect storm where a lot of your childhood, kind of obstacles you were facing. I'm sure that the mental health pieces started screaming a lot louder at that
Yeah.
point as well. And and you're basically sounds like you're just trying to numb yourself and get some relief from all of that tension.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't make the connection then, because when I was drinking, I was drinking and I felt good, when I was on an
Yeah.
influence, and I didn't make that distinct connection until I got older, and really started putting it together and start going into treatment. But I know alcohol made me feel better. I felt that I was more sociable because I'm more of an introvert,
Hmm.
and alcohol made me
Yep.
more extroverted. At least I thought anyway. And it got to the point where alcohol wasn't doing it for me no more.
Hmm.
So then, I started gravitating towards the harder drugs, And the time I got into my 20s, I graduated to the cocaine and heroin. And
Hmm.
I started, consuming alcohol and mixing it with heroin and cocaine. And back in my day, mixing cocaine and heroin together, we used to call that speedball. And that was a very, very dangerous concoction to put together. And I'm
Hmm.
just grateful that I'm still alive just to share that story. But alcohol for me, I didn't even consider alcohol was a drug, because
Right.
yeah, it was just something that we did in our culture and our society, and I kind of just gravitated towards that. And but once I kind of graduated, so to speak, to the harder drugs, it just took me to a whole new different destruction path,
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, I mean, hard drugs was not a part of my journey, but having
Yeah.
talked to a handful of folks, I mean, I'm glad you're still around as well. I mean, I know that that's a pretty deep hole to climb out of,
Mm,
even with a ton of support. So, hats off to you on that for
thank
sure.
you.
Let's pause it right there. I want to step back and so you talked about how you came from a very religious, very strict household.
Mhm.
You and your brothers sounds like you guys were living you had your outside life and then you had your life at home. What did that conflict and that tension look like? With your parents, with your father specifically, and with the culture that I'm sure that he wanted you all to grow up into, but
Mhm.
clearly you were living a different lifestyle, and I'm sure that
Mhm.
didn't make it easy for you. What did that look like for you and your brothers? And then secondly, how did they fare in all of that as well?
Yeah, yeah, very good questions, Ray. Like for me, it just was, being the youngest, having older brothers, and being in a very strict dynamics at home. My parents are from South Carolina. They worked really hard. They both came from big families. My mother and father, they kind of migrated to the north and really, started off in the projects and really worked really hard, for
Hmm.
to raise their five sons the best way they knew how. And growing up in a religious foundation, and wanted to bring that to their kids. I really admire them and I appreciate that, but I felt smothered, because I went to
Hmm.
church like at least 4 or 5 times a week, 'cause it was
Right, that's
always
a lot.
Bible study, prayer service, Sunday school, Sunday service. at the service. So there was a lot of that religious faith just pushed down my throat, and it just certain things growing up as a pastor's kid, a preacher kid, just didn't resonate with me. I've seen a lot, living from that perspective as a preacher's kid, going to the
Hmm.
church, and a lot of it just seems um, there's a lot of hypocrisy I've seen,
Right.
and it didn't gel with me at all. So therefore, I kind of rebelled, in my early teen and teenage years, and I went the opposite. I wanted to go the opposite way, and my father was very, very strict. We we got punished, we got disciplined. But that still didn't turn me of the direction I was going, the lifestyle I was living, the people I was associated with, and even my brothers as well too. They were my role models, and they was going down a
Yeah.
similar path that I was as well too with the alcohol. And we rebelled. We were the epitome of the prodigal son, so to speak. And I had to go through my own dark night of the soul, own experiences with alcohol and other drugs, to really come around, to really see it for what it really was, and how I'm grateful for the upbringing that I did receive at a young age, but I wasn't ready to receive it at that time.
Yeah.
And so we clashed a lot. Me and my father, we argued a lot. He kicked me out the house many a times, and he accepted me back in. But he wasn't happy with the lifestyle that I was living, my older brothers was living, and it was hard on my parents as well too. But it was really hard on us because society and a culture, when you're the son of a preacher or son of a pastor, for some reason they feel appropriate to put people like ourselves on pedestals, and
Right.
I didn't want that at all. It's like we're human beings, and I'm ripping and running with a lot of people's kids that with the church with, and they're no angel as well too, but we seem to be put on a pedestal because of our upbringing, and that was a lot of pressure. That was a lot of
Yeah.
pressure. Kind of dealing with that.
Yeah, the concept of church, particularly in the Black community, is, I mean, is come up a couple times, obviously, on this show, considering how many folks of color that we talk to,
Yeah.
um, and it's always interesting to me. I didn't grow up in the church, but I spent some time in the church, but never in the church community.
Hmm.
It's always interesting to me this like very clear division between the culture in the church and the culture that a lot of the younger churchgoers are involved in outside of the church, and just like
Hmm.
the fundamental like moral clash between those two lives, and how
Yes.
debilitating I'm assuming that would be for a young person just trying to figure their way in life, let
Yes.
alone trying to understand these very, very lofty, these lofty concepts that church talks about.
Yes.
It's I can only imagine the degree. I mean, especially as a Black person, just trying to like figure out their own identity, their own way. Where I can see that would be extremely supportive and maybe nurturing for some. To your
Hmm.
point, it could be smothering for others, where
Yes.
you almost feel as though that you're being suppressed in a way from being your true self.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's exactly what it was. You broke it down, and it was that like cognitive dissonance, that was
Yeah.
inside of myself where, this is the upbringing, the program I received at a very young age. But it wasn't really gelling with me, wasn't resonating with me to a certain level, but yet at the same time, I'm growing up in a subculture. That's when hip hop, I was really, really into hip hop and the subculture back in, the late 80s, early 90s. And I
And you're
wanted
in
to find
Connecticut.
my
You're in Connecticut at this time, right?
yes, I'm in
Which is
Connecticut. Yes.
basically right next door to the Bronx. I mean, if you can
That's
shoot,
right. Yeah, yeah.
so I'm sure you're getting a lot of that, that kind of spillover from the culture.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes, I was really big into the Zulu Nation and African Bambaataa and all the
Yeah.
originators of hip hop, and my brothers were and everything too. So hip hop was our subculture, and kind of
Mhm.
like trying to find my own way within that. And hip hop was a lifestyle that I used to kind of like to find my way, to express myself the way I wanted to.
Mhm.
And part of my subculture and my lifestyle at that time was the use of drinking, and connecting with my boys and smoking weed and all those different things, as well as dancing, MCing, graffiti art, and all the whole lifestyle that we was able to express ourselves. But it got to the point where my alcohol consumption was very high, and
Yep.
I wasn't drinking to socialize. It got
Mhm.
to the point where I was drinking to get drunk,
Yeah.
and that was the big problem for me.
No, I get it. I get it. I mean, it's kind of a side note. We just celebrated this past year 50 years of hip hop, and
Yes,
and in that we seldom talk about how ingrained alcohol has been in like the hip hop culture, how ingrained
that's true.
drug use has been in the hip hop culture. Maybe we'll get further into that over the next 50 years or so. But
Yeah,
I totally. I mean, I get it. I mean, when I was growing up, I was in Canada, and and I was also subscribing to that culture and going, grabbing my 40s and
yes,
not thinking anything about it because that's what I
yeah,
was seeing from the culture. I mean,
yes,
I totally get it. Um, so back on track. Let's get back to where we left off. You're 21, I believe. You're drinking heavily. You're into all various drugs. At what point in time did the wheels just start coming off for you and you had to take a hard look at how you were going to do some things differently, and what did that path look like for you?
yeah. It just the automobile accidents, the
Mm,
physical altercation at bars and in the streets, and all those different things. I still didn't see my problem, and I get arrested, and I'll go to court. The judge would he'll put me on probation, mandate me to go to a drug treatment program, get the support, the treatment that I need, and being monitored on probation. But I never took none of that seriously, and I ended up getting into more trouble.
mm.
And it got to the point where the judge got tired of seeing my ass, and he started sending me to
Okay.
prison. So he was like, okay, you got to learn the hard way. I see, huh?
Mm,
And I started going. I went to prison, and even then, I'll get out and do the same thing. We was, I was ready to see my fellas and go get drunk and all the just the fast lifestyle we were living, But for me, it wasn't till my last prison bid that I did where I was convicted of 5 years, suspended after 26 months with 4 years probation, and it was stemmed from my alcohol and drug use. And it was then, I never forget laying in that jail cell, still detoxing from the night before, from alcohol, from
mm.
marijuana, from cocaine, from heroin, prescription opioids like Oxycontin, Vicodins, and Percocets, Klonopins. I had a lot of
Everything.
drugs with my system. Yeah, yeah. And, thinking about the pain that I caused to my family, particularly my daughter. My
Mm,
daughter, she seen me, I'm intoxicated. She see me verbally and physically abusive. She see me just causing all kinds of mayhem and issues, And I'm sure that was very traumatizing for her just to see her father being intoxicated, causing so much mayhem in the streets.
hmm.
And, I was thinking about her, laying in my bunk bed, thinking about her. And, that's when, it really, really hit me. And, I was at that point where I was done. I was exhausted. I was tired. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
And for me, I learned that's when the window of opportunity opened for me when I was ready to surrender and to really get the support that I need. And going through the whole process with court and end up being convicted, sent to prison again. But this time I was ready. I was ready to make the necessary changes in my life. And my daughter Tatiana, she was my inspiration for me to find the inner motivation to really change my life around for the better, because I wanted to be the man, the father that my daughter look up to and be proud
Yeah.
of. So while in prison, I took advantage of all the programs that was available in prison. And the one program that really, really helped me the most was the drug treatment program in prison. So it was a drug treatment program that I needed to do in order to be paroled, but I wanted to do for myself,
Right.
and that really helped me to look at things from a different perspective. I was able to learn about addiction, and how it impacts me mentally, emotionally, physically, and also believe how it impacts me spiritually as well too. And I was able to learn about the science of addiction, how it impacts the brain as well.
Hmm.
And I was able to learn a little bit more about myself and my relationship to alcohol and other drugs. But not only that, I was able to learn tools and practices um, to to kind of deal with the root causes of my experience with addiction, such as yoga, meditation, sound healing, even creative expressive arts like poetry and journaling. And Ray, I had a lot of misconceptions about yoga, about meditation. I didn't feel comfortable doing it in prison, but I know the things I was doing prior to going to prison wasn't working for me no more. So I had to
Yep.
try something new and different. And these misconceptions I had, I honestly thought that yoga was for privileged, rich white women because the
Yeah.
way it's marketed here in the United States. And I thought meditation was for hippies and Buddhists. So I didn't subscribe to none of that. So I didn't really think it was for me. But the things I was doing, it wasn't working.
Yep.
So by stepping out of that comfort zone and utilizing practices like sound healing and yoga and meditation, allowing that to be a vehicle for me to go within, because I learned that for me, true, authentic, sustainable healing begins with inside of ourselves. And I was able to find that sense of calmness and inner peace, even being in a very hostile and restrictive environment such as prison.
Hmm.
But most importantly, I was able to understand the root causes of my experiences with addiction. And from my lived experience, for me, I learned that it was the unhealed emotional pain that I experienced in my life, the unprocessed trauma that I endured from childhood, adolescence, as well as adulthood trauma, as well as all the toxic chronic stress. For me, all of that was at the root of my addiction. So for many years, I reached for something outside of myself to find a sense of relief from that distress. And for me, I found it in alcohol and other drugs, and it worked for a while until it didn't work anymore. And I got caught up in that very vicious cycle of addiction. So it was my experience in prison that really transformed my life, and I really found freedom behind bars. I found
Hmm.
recovery while incarcerated, and that really helped me to change the trajectory of my lifestyle, and just really start seeing things from a different perspective.
Oh man, Kelvin, you just put so much out there, man. I don't know where to go first. Man, well, look, first and foremost, I thank you for sharing all that.
Yes, sir.
I haven't spent time in prison, but I can imagine that it's very challenging to find light in such a dark place. And I'm so grateful for you that you were able to do that, because obviously you've been able to pay that forward, to many lives that you've been able to touch, since then. You mentioned that you had all these preconceived notions about these healing actions that you stepped into, yoga, meditation, so on and so forth. And it's funny because there are a lot of things that can be to our benefit that we oftentimes deem as not being for us, right?
Yes.
Like spending time in nature, that's a white person thing.
Right.
Yoga, that's a white person, that's a
Mhm.
rich white person thing.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about this a little bit lately, and just looking at the landscape, and not to take anything away from anybody in the recovery space, but
Mhm.
you almost get this sense sometime that recovery has been packaged in a way that we don't feel as though that is for us either.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I love the fact that we're having this conversation, because I
Yes.
think it's important for us to encounter a lot of these difficult things and
Mhm.
recognize that we can do things that historically hasn't been looked at as being for us, but we can
Yes.
embrace them as ours in order to find our own healing and path forward.
Absolutely. I totally agree. What you shared really touched me as well too. I think nature is one of the most underutilized antidepressants out there.
Yeah.
Spending quality time in nature is very therapeutic and healing. And when I did some research, when I think about all these ancient healing modalities that's been around for a very, very long time, when we go to ancient Kemet, modern day Egypt,
Hmm.
it's all over the walls, the different practices of yoga that they were practicing. I had to really do some research and really had to unlearn a lot of the things that I've learned about these holistic healing modalities. Is that a lot of our culture, it was enriched by a lot of these healing practices that now you see in our modern day society in the Western world, whereas these practices in ancient Africa were demonized,
Yeah.
and we kind of like bought into that program that doing practices like comedic yoga or meditation or just Reiki, energy healing, all these different practices, that it was against our faith,
Yeah.
that it was actually sinister or evil or witchcraft. We was bought into that program to believe that, but once we kind of unlearn a lot of things that we was programmed to learn about these holistic healing modalities, and move them to the side and really experience it for themselves, and really maybe do some research and understand that our ancestors practice these healing modalities, sound healing, particularly with the drum in Africa, Western Africa, where my
Hmm.
ancestors are from. It was a tool for rites of passage, for healing, for ceremony, all kind of different celebrations. And the rhythm of the drum, that the rhythm of the earth, there's something very powerful. And we even go back to the scriptures. You think about David, how he played the harp, and all these different instruments that were used in healing in our in ancient times. So therefore, once we move past those misconceptions and really learn about these modalities, and really embody these practices and experience it for ourselves, a lot of the healing and from the traumas and pain and hurt that we've been through and endured, particularly in this culture and in this country, we could help with the healing process with that, and
Yep.
so many different modalities. Like poetry was a practice, journaling was a practice that I use. If it's okay, Ray, I'd love to share a poem that I wrote
Absolutely.
while I was in prison.
Yeah.
It was very therapeutic for me to recite that, and to write it. And by practicing meditation and really with sound, I was able to really go within and really connect to those emotions that are suppressed under the influence of alcohol and other drugs. And, to be honest, there was a lot of drugs in prison as well too,
Mm.
but I made that commitment to myself. I made that commitment to my daughter not to consume any more drugs, to really wanted to change my life around for the better. And by practicing these modalities, such as sound healing and meditation, I was allowed to feel all those raw human emotions that are suppressed for many years,
Mm.
and allowed to come to the surface. And learning about poetry and journaling, I was able to process these emotions in a very therapeutic and healing way through
Mm.
poetry. And the name of this poem that I wrote while I was in prison, that was extremely therapeutic for me then, and it's therapeutic for me now to recite it. It's called Eyes of a Silent Sun.
Mm.
Look into my eyes and tell me what you see. Is it a lost soul with no control, trying to be free? As I look into the mirror and stare into my eyes, I see all the anger and self hate, hypocrisy and lies. I see resentment, frustration, embarrassment, and pain. I see jail bars and fancy cars as I cruise down memory lane. I see the feelings I repressed, going back to childhood. I need to let go of those feelings. I would if I could. I see the hurt that I caused to the ones I love the most. I see my brother on his wedding day as we celebrate with a toast. I see the good and bad times that I experienced in my life, but it's so hard to let go of all that bitterness and strife. There's a sense of sadness when you look into my eyes, like the ones you see when a close relative dies. But this death is not physical, it has to do with the soul. It's that morbid feeling we get when our spiritual energy is low. It's like nothing matters anymore, like that day when I was fired, feeling depressed and weak. Can't sleep, but I'm so tired. I'm tired of all the pain, the hurt, and the rain from that cloud that keeps following me. Sometimes I think I'm insane. When I look out the window, see the beauty of the lake. It reminds me of good times, like when I was 9 and things were fine. And with the sunrise, I can feel the presence of the Creator. When I look out my window, I see me in the beauty of nature. I'm a part of God's creation, nature, and humanity. The love and spirit that's in Jesus is also in me. So I learned to love myself and others just for who we are. And I learned all about this love looking out my window with jail bars.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. If you are, we'd really love it if you could leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcast or a rating on Spotify. And of course, please feel free to invite somebody into the conversation. If you feel like you have a story to share on the podcast, why not apply to be a guest? You can do so by completing the form on the podcast description or find it on stackanddays.com. That's stacknday's.com. But for now, let's jump back into the conversation.
For me, I learned about love in a very unusual place, in prison behind bars. And by practicing sound healing and meditation and in yoga and allow that to be a vehicle for me to go within, I was able to see that shame and guilt that often keeps people like ourselves in a very vicious cycle of addiction. But I also was able to move past that shame and guilt and connect to the true essence of who I am. And I believe the true essence that each and every one of us are. The essence I'm talking about, the unconditional agape love. Now, for me, I believe that love is more than just, a human emotion. I believe that love is a vibration, it's a frequency. It's also a natural state of being. So what I really truly understand that the same love and divine essence that created the sun, the moon, the stars, all the beauty of nature, it created me, it created you, it created all of us. And oftentimes our addiction to alcohol and other drugs, the poor choices we make, the traumas, it makes us feel so disconnected to that inner love that dwells inside of us. It makes us feel fragmented and broken. And once I was able to kind of see that divine essence, the divine spark that dwells in me, that dwells in all of us, that created all of this, it lives within me. And that gave me the energy to look for that and really reconnect back to that love. Because that love really never left. And once I was able to connect back to that love and start seeing myself, the world, and the people in it in a different way. And I really became excited about really living a new life. I was excited to get out of prison and live a life of sobriety, but I also was nervous as well too, because this is how I bonded with my brothers, my close friends, so it was a whole different experience for me, but I was excited and nervous at the same time.
No, I bet. Firstly, thank you for sharing that poem. I feel like when I hear that, I almost can visually see this rose growing out of the concrete.
Mm.
Which is a fantastic visual representation of your growth in that moment in your life. And I want to get into the sound healing more. I want to get into that aspect of your work, because I think that for a lot of folks of color, that's a very foreign concept. We don't even know what that is. So we'll get there. But before we get there, I do want to talk about that reentry for you. I mean, you go in one Kelvin, you come out of there a different Kelvin.
Yes.
Not just even for your brothers and for your your folks, but I'm sure even your daughter Tatiana, she's probably trying to grasp her mind around, well, who is this guy? Yes. He doesn't resemble, he physically resembles my dad.
Yeah.
But clearly, walking with a different energy. So like, what did that reentry look like for you, and how did you maintain that that spiritual discipline that you found in prison to continue to walk on this path that was starting to light you up from the inside?
Yeah. Great question. It was connected to that divine spark. Like growing up, like I said, in a very religious family, where religion was kind of shoved down my throat, But it wasn't until I went to prison the fourth time where I was able to develop a personal relationship with the divine, and also a personal relationship with the teachings of Jesus as well. And the thing that I learned about the teachings of Jesus was love. Love for the divine, love for ourselves, and love for other people as ourselves, because I realized that we are one. So that divine essence of love and the teachings of Jesus, what I've learned while I was incarcerated, that really helped me to really build my spirituality. But also the foundation what my mother and father instilled in me, that played a big part in it as well too. So that's why I'm grateful for, kind of like having the upbringing that I did, and I had to learn like the prodigal son learned and go through my own experiences. But with all of that, I was able to have a really focused awareness of what I want to do in my life. Because being in prison, I learned these tools, these holistic practices, but I also learned more about myself. And I wanted to work in a recovery field. I wanted to give back what I've learned while I was incarcerated. And so I was energized. I was psyched. I was ready. But like I said before, I was also nervous as well too, because I didn't know I had a plan, but being in prison and going out in the world, sometimes things can you can take a detour really
Yeah,
quick.
I bet.
So what really helped me was sober support.
Okay.
When I got out, I connected with an organization called Access to Recovery, and I connected with another a recovery coach that have lived experience with alcohol and other drugs and was in recovery herself. And she connected me to different resources within the community as well. But I really enjoyed meeting with her every week, and we didn't meet in a clinical setting in the office. We met, at a coffee house in the
Right.
community because I felt so disconnected to, the community. I didn't feel like a citizen, so to speak, because all these stigmatizing labels that society puts on people with lived experiences as me, I internalized those stigmas. Oh, I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a convicted felon, I'm a high school dropout. So I felt so disconnected to the larger community. So
Mm.
just meeting in the coffee house and kind of talking about my experiences and my life and the direction I wanted to go, that was extremely healing within itself, and having a person with similar lived experience that understood my feelings and my pain and my hurts and my concerns and my direction, my passion as well too, and connect me to different resources to really help me to really move forward on those passions of mine and desires that I had was paramount. It was really very powerful for me, and and connected me to a recovery community, which is CCAR, which stands for Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery, and connected with them, volunteering with them. They have what they call a telephone recovery support, where they
Okay.
have somebody call you that was in recovery themselves and kind of talk about just what's going on, and kind of talk about some of the challenges you might be facing, coming home. And that was very helpful for me as well too. And it might sound cliche, but like I heard people, places, and things. I really had to change all of that,
Hmm.
including my family. Three of my four older brothers. We used to drink, we used to socialize. This is how we bonded and connected. I had to learn how to love them from a distance. And that
Right.
was extremely painful to do, particularly in the beginning, because I love my family. I love the time we spent together, drinking and consuming as well too. And that was something of a loss that I had
Yeah.
to grieve. I had to grieve that whole lifestyle, that whole process once I was released, because I wasn't expecting that sense of loss and grief. I'm
Mm.
feeling that, but I had to learn to love them from a distance and really focus on the lifestyle that I wanted to live and really be around sober community. And in prison, we did a lot of 12-step work, a lot of NA groups and everything. But when I got out, it was a little different, to be honest with you. And 12 steps in AAA, that's good for some people, but it didn't really resonate with me. I
Mm.
learned some principles within the steps, and I think one of the things that's really powerful for a lot of people that 12 step does help is the community aspects of it,
Hmm.
you know. But when I walked into a lot of recovery spaces in my towns and the places I went to, I was particularly like, it was me and maybe a couple other people that could count and on one hand how many other people that looked like me in these spaces. So I felt othered a lot, and also these meetings could be very clicky.
Yeah.
The meetings that I went to, not all of them, but a lot of the meetings I went to were very clicky. If you don't fit into that clique, you could be othered or outcast, so to speak, as well too. So it didn't really gel with me, and also some of the language or terminology. Once I started building more of a holistic approach to addiction recovery, didn't resonate with me no more as well. It got to the point. I understand that if the impact that addiction had on me, and I was very much addicted to alcohol and other drugs. But I had to learn to switch my mindset, and it got to the point where I had an issue standing up and saying my name is Kelvin and I'm an addict or alcoholic. Because one of the things I realized that any word that we use after I am, we manifest in our
Mm.
life by doing
Mm.
holistic practices, and not to negate the impact that addiction had on me, but those stigmatizing labels, it kept me in a box,
Right.
for a certain degree. Today I'll say I'm a person that's in recovery, or a person that's sober, but I'm a human being first. I'm a father, I'm a brother, I'm a son. I'm so much more
Yep.
than a so-called disease. So that didn't resonate with me no more, because I believe that addiction is a human experience, not a human identity. Because
Mm-hmm.
behind the so-called addict, behind the so-called alcoholic, I believe is a human being that experienced a significant amount of trauma, emotional distress, and toxic chronic stress, and looking for a sense of relief from that distress. And I believe we live in a culture and in a society that kind of conditions us to reach for something outside of ourselves when we're dealing with any type of pain, whether it's a physical pain or emotional pain. As a kid growing up, whenever I had a toothache or headache, I was conditioned to reach for aspirin, Tylenol, Excedrin, what have you. And I use a physical painkiller, a legitimate physical painkiller, such as Oxycontin, Vicodins, Percocets, and heroin, and even alcohol to deal with emotional pain. And like I said, it worked for a while until it didn't work. So
No.
I just really built community. Then I had to build other sober community that had more of a holistic approach to it as well too. And that really helped me to sustain my recovery for over 14 years now.
Mm.
And just yesterday, I was honored. I show you the Recovery Advocate of the Year from the organization that really helped me to sustain my recovery, Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery. And just reflecting on that, and it was just an honor just to know that I went from that prison cell and feeling kind of beat up, hopeless, despaired. And my daughter was that inspiration for me to really ready to make some sustainable changes. Being in prison, learning these holistic healing modalities to really help me to go within, to really see the root causes of my experiences with addiction, and giving me this passion to help other people that going through similar experiences with addiction, then being released and really learning how to have a lifestyle, live a really healthy lifestyle without the use of alcohol and other drugs, and really have a healthy relationship with the loved ones in my life, the people that I cared about, that knew me the most. It was a very profound experience for me. And having that experience, I have a desire to support other people on their own personal healing journey of sobriety.
No, I love that, man. Congratulations on the recognition that they bestowed on you. I think that's awesome, and fully, such a far cry from where you started, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you talk about 14 years of recovery. Most of the folks that I talk to on this show, I mean, they're in 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe
Mhm.
5 years. So to speak to someone who's been on the road for some time, I'm sure that you still deal with stress. I'm
Oh yeah.
sure that you still deal with a lot of the societal pressures that we are all, dealing with, but you've certainly found a more productive way to be able to manage those sorts of things so that you can live a healthier lifestyle,
Yes,
a
sir.
holistic lifestyle, healthy
Yeah.
lifestyle, and you're passing that on to other people. So, I mean, I got two questions for you.
Yeah.
One, and we talked a little bit about this before the show. How do you advocate and guide other Black men as they're trying to understand their own path? I think
Yeah.
that's one topic that I definitely want to cover, and then I want to talk about sound healing because I had my own experience recently with
Hmm.
sound healing, and it opened up some things inside of me that I had never felt before. So I
Yeah.
can only imagine that the practice of it could be very deep for someone who's open to it. So I don't know if those two pieces overlap with one another, but I would love for you to share your perspective on both.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I believe they do. When I really think about it, because for me, it really helped me to kind of go within and open up those emotions and feelings that I suppressed for many years that were very uncomfortable to look at. But I noticed that I had to feel before I heal. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So I had to feel those raw human emotions that I didn't want to feel, that was very uncomfortable for me. And working with Black men, I'm working with some other colleagues of mine, Black men that we get together and we have lunch once a month. And, we call ourselves sober Black men. And so just with that whole concept, we wanted to, kind of create like an online support group for Black men that's in or seeking sobriety or recovery, or what even that means. We go into certain neighborhoods, when it's predominantly Black and brown folks. We see a lot of package stores, liquor stores, alcohol stores, and that's intentionally. I
hmm
remember when the crack epidemic, came back in the 80s, where it really impact the Black and Brown community, but that was intentional as well too. So there's a lot of these substances, including alcohol, that's within in Black neighborhoods, that's really out to kind of like
Keep us
um,
down.
keep us down, and cause us harm to our minds and our bodies, and I believe our souls as well too. So just really having conversations around that, I think, it's so important. What is our relationship with alcohol? For me, kind of growing up in the subculture that I did, and how liquor companies, I should say, they use particular artists and rappers and people that have influence within the Black communities, and have influence in the hip hop communities, or even Black genres of music, to promote their alcohol consumptions. And
Mm.
we're always being programmed, whether it's through our music, whether it's through Hollywood and the movies and the TV shows that we watch. So even social media, all these different things, it program our subconscious where all the real power is really at. So we've seen all these celebrities and people using drugs, consuming alcohol. It seemed like, and the way they glamorize it within our culture, it seemed like that's the cool hip thing to do. But they don't talk about the other side, how it destroys families, destroy homes, people go to prisons, people get killed and murdered, domestic violence, and driving under influence, all these different other things associated with alcohol. So therefore, just having a conversation around that, so we can have like a real honest, real talk, real life situation, how alcohol impacts us, but
Yep.
also talk about why we drink alcohol. There's a reason why we drink. And as Black men, one of the emotions that I'm able to express more, just openly, was anger. And my
Mm-hmm.
anger quickly turned to rage when I was under the influence of alcohol and other drugs. And that rage, that anger got me into a lot of trouble. But
Yep.
once I was able to go through counseling and therapy, and once I was able to peel back and go underneath that anger, I realized that it was a lot of fear, a lot of sadness, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, which in our culture, it doesn't feel comfortable for Black men to express that.
Yep.
And we have histories of traumas, that extends back from our ancestors. There's a saying, my friend Nikki Myers, she's the founder of Yoga and 12-Step Recovery. She's the one that often says that our issues live in our tissues. And I
Hmm.
find that to be so, so true. The trauma that we experience in our lives, those emotions that we suppress or repress, it's in our bodies, it's in our muscles, it's in our tissues. Our cells have memory, and our body keeps score of all of our experiences we go through on that journey that we call life. So as Black men, sometimes we don't realize why we feel so much anger, so much hostility. We're hyper vigilant, all these different type of uncomfortable, intense emotions, and how we reach for a blunt, how we reach for a bottle to help to alleviate that. And that makes sense. It makes sense to me why,
Totally.
we want to eliminate that distress. And sometimes we don't even know where that distress comes from. But a
Yeah.
lot of it is in our bodies. So just really having spaces where we could come, having podcasts like yours where we could learn more about, alcohol consumption and how it impacts us, and just really giving people tools to help to have a different relationship with alcohol, whether they want to reduce the harm that alcohol may be causing within their life or into their bodies, or they want to have abstinence from it,
Yep.
and really go a different route. Having different resources and tools and practices, and to address that. But also, I believe it's so important that we address the root cause, not just mitigating the symptoms of the conditions that we're dealing with, but addressing the root causes. And that's what practices like sound healing, yoga, meditation, clinical therapy, being out in nature, connecting with other human beings that have our best interests at heart really comes into play.
Yep.
And so sound healing is one of those holistic healing modalities that can really help us to do that. So, during my experiences with sound healing, I use the crystal singing bowls. I use the Himalayan singing bowl, so like a bowl like this, which is
Mm-hmm.
made of different metals. I use the gong, the ocean drum, all the different healing tools and instruments that I utilize to help us to activate and stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system,
Hmm.
also known as the relaxation response, to help us to calm our minds, to relax our bodies, to feel our emotions, and to nourish our souls. And the meditative sounds produced from all the different healing tools that are utilized during a sound healing session, it promotes healing from chronic stress, muscle tension, physical pain that we feel in our bodies, feelings of anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, sleep issues, and different other stress-related chronic health conditions that we experience in our lives. All those different types of emotional distresses that I just named was the main reason why I reached for alcohol and other drugs in the first place. And even though those substances gave me a temporary sense of relief, but for me and many people like ourselves, it caused more negative consequences at the end. So
Yeah.
really just giving people tools to really work with, to do the inner work they need to do in order to heal.
Yeah. I mean, you had a line that you had mentioned earlier. I think it was, you got to feel before you heal.
Yes, sir.
And, we are so apprehensive to any of those feelings because, I mean, let's be honest, they just hurt so much, right? Like we do anything we
Mm-hmm.
can, even if it resorts to killing ourselves slowly to avoid some of these things. And, so I love the fact that you've, are trying to create these paradigm shifts within our culture, one
Yes.
individual at a time, so they
Yes.
recognize that, number one, you can feel these things.
That's right.
Number two, you can also heal from these things
That's right.
if you want to.
That's
So I
right.
think that those are honorable things that you're doing in the community, and I hope that I can actually make my way out to Connecticut at some point. I'd love to do a sound healing session with you. I think that that's an extremely powerful tool to just touch into an aspect of yourself that otherwise you didn't even either know that it existed, or it's
Mm-hmm.
just generally pretty dormant most days. So
Absolutely.
I think it's pretty strong stuff.
Yeah, I would love to have you. I'm honored to be co-founder with Soul Care Love with my beautiful life partner, Maria Del Carmen, and we really create these safe spaces for people to really connect to the inner healer that dwells inside of them. And sound healing really creates that space for people to be still and
Mm.
go within and connect to that inner GPS to help them to navigate through life in a way that works best for them.
Yeah, get to that issue in our tissue as
That's
you.
right. Yes.
I
Yes,
love that.
sir.
I love that. Well, look, I got a couple questions that I'll ask you as we kind of close out here,
Mhm,
Kelvin, and then I'll let you go. One, I'm just curious what your perspective is on this. I ask these questions of everyone,
mhm,
and there's no right or wrong answer. So just putting that out there. The first question is, for someone who's sitting there, they're listening to this podcast. They recognize that they got an issue. The day looks so dark that it looks like it will never be light. But they want to move towards that light. They
yes.
want to get better. They want to tackle their struggle, but they don't know how to do it. They don't even know what the first step's going to be. Like, what would you propose that individual do?
Yeah, it's there's so many there are resources out there, but sometimes searching different resources can be very confusing, overwhelming
Mm,
as well too. When we Google something and we look for whether it's a treatment center or a detox center or some type of support, depending on our insurance or our financial status and everything as well too. There's also a lot of barriers as well too. So, the first thing, we could go to YouTube, which is free, and,
mm,
go to different videos, go to your podcast, other podcasts that talks about, alcohol addiction or any addiction to any substances, and kind of get information about that and maybe perhaps some inspiration to really change your life around. And also there's some things we can do. And one of the things I suggest is like, okay, what does alcohol do for you? I invite people to kind of like sit down and do some self-reflection to like
yep.
understand why the reason you're drinking alcohol in the first place. So what is the pros of drinking alcohol and what are the cons for drinking alcohol? And really do some introspection and really reflect on the pros and cons of their relationship to alcohol or any other drug and really weigh it out, and along with, reading some books and listening to podcasts and checking out some videos on recovery and sobriety on YouTube and really have, you know, come up with an idea of what path you want to go, and once that path, whether it's treatment, whether you want to live a different lifestyle, there's so many different resources, um, if you enter 12 steps, 12 step is a community that people can go to, but also there's smart recovery now. There's refuge recovery, which is more a Buddhist based practice of sobriety. There's so many different um, peer support organizations and meetings that people can go to and be around community. And I encourage anybody to connect with some sober friends or sober community that can help you to answer any questions that you may have, and associate yourself with people that have the same vision and goals as you do. And if your goal is to be sober, connect with people that's sober as well too.
Yep.
And read all you can, learn all you can about alcohol or any other drug addiction, but also learn more about yourself and the reason why we reach for a substance and behavior to alleviate, reach for alcohol to alleviate some of the distresses and feelings that we may have within inside of ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, curiosity is one of those paths to self-discovery, right? And I
Yes,
think
yes,
that to open yourself up, to start having some of those conversations with yourself before having them with anybody else, having that degree of honesty and curiosity for
yes.
yourself will
Hmm.
lead you to a path that maybe you weren't on yesterday. So thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that. Uh,
absolutely.
last question I have for you
Mhm.
is, and this is again the question that I ask of all my guests, because I think it's important for not only those who are in the midst of the struggle, but those who are witnessing those who are in the midst of struggle.
Mhm.
In your darkest days, how would someone have known that you were struggling without you explicitly telling them?
Mm. Yeah, there's certain signs. Um, Isolation is a big one. For
Mm,
me, I used to come home. I used to isolate myself in my room. Didn't want to socialize with my family, so that was a big one. Um, I dealt with depression as well too. So there's points where I used to sleep a lot. That's a tell sign for struggles. But just be intoxicated all the time. Seeing or smelling alcohol or just slur speech.
hmm
Um, not taking care of your personal hygiene like you used to. Um, Mannerisms, attitudes, feeling, a lot of anger. I had a lot of anger and hostility. I was short tempered a lot of times as well too,
hmm
and just little shifts in our attitudes and our demeanor and our hygiene and our behaviors um, are telltale signs. But it's hard for sometimes family members to or loved ones to notice when they have a particular loved one that's addicted to a substance or a behavior that's no longer serving them, is causing harm. And the thing I learned about addiction, that impacts not only the addicted person, but their loved ones as well too. And I
Yep.
think it's also important for the loved ones to, especially the loved ones that have in direct contact with an addicted person, is to find support for themselves as well too, and get the
Yeah.
healing and support, and make sure that they take care of their well-being as well too.
Yep. That's a great call out. Thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Calvin, where can folks find you?
Absolutely. They could check me out, my website, at soulcarelove.llc.com. There's, lists of different individuals and private sound healing sessions that we offer. We also offer virtual gong baths as well too, which you'll be able to experience a sound healing session virtually as well too, which is very awesome. And my partner Maria and I, we're coming up with some online courses as well too, and how to utilize and incorporate sound healing into your daily practice, how to pick up a bowl, whether it's a Himalayan singer bowl or a crystal bowl or maybe a drum or a shaker or a rattle or a chime, to help you to take care of your well-being as well too.
Mm,
And we also have um, our own personal blend of cacao, which is the
okay.
purest form of dark chocolate. It's considered a superfood. One of the things that when I was in early recovery, especially in the 12-step communities, we used to drink a lot of coffee. And the way I used to drink coffee, it was very unhealthy. I added a lot of sugar to it, and a lot of other crap to my coffee, and that coffee used to give me the jitters after a while.
Right.
Almost like the same feelings where I was using cocaine. So I connected with a chocolatier. Shout out to Aruna Chocolates, and I wanted to come up with a blend that for people that have similar experiences with me, like me, but also a healthier alternative for people. And the cacao is rich in magnesium, rich in antioxidants, and nutrients that our body needs to thrive. So we also, we sell that on our website as well too, which is a great alternative to coffee. And you're more than welcome to reach out to us directly. All the contact information is on our website as well.
Awesome. I'll also throw in there, you got a YouTube page. I was sitting there just enjoying some of the soundtracks that you had put up recently. So we'll throw that into the show notes as well.
Thank you, brother. Yes.
Yeah, you got it, man. Well, look, Kelvin, it's been such a pleasure, man. I'm glad that we were able to make this happen and have you come on. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I'll know we'll stay connected. And I got family out in Connecticut, so when I come out there next time, I'm gonna drop you a line and see if we can get a session up.
Yes, please do. I would really, really love that. I would love that a lot. Yes.
Awesome, man. Well, look, I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. Everyone who's listening to the episode, thanks for tuning in, and stay tuned for next week's show. All right, peace. I appreciate you guys listening to the Stacking Days podcast. I hope this episode added value to your recovery and wellness journey. Before we go our separate ways, let's connect on social. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Stacking Days or via the website www.stackingdays.com. By supporting the show, you can play a direct role in amplifying people of color in their pursuit of recovery. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe or hit the follow button. This way, you'll never miss an episode, all while playing an active part in creating the ecosystem where diverse voices in healing matter. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. For more information on the resources and support available, take a look at SAMHSA and some other resources shared in the description. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.